I've spent some time on this channel discussing the failings of the baby boomer generation and combing through the messaging they were subjected to. The cultural influences that informed many of their manufactured beliefs, the paradox of focusing on selfish pursuits while attributing their luxuries to something unearned and undeserved, and therefore something that should be disposed of so that future generations will be unable to enjoy this same bounty they grew up with, including their children. Generation X and millennials are sometimes lumped together, and for good reason. As the boomers decided to put off having children to make room for a career, it led to a new phenomenon in which the baby boomer generation was raising two separate generations simultaneously. And while there are still some very clear distinctions that can be made between the two generations, Generation X and millennials, this phenomenon has certainly blurred the lines in some areas, as many in these two separate generations had the exact same parents, giving them a shared experience that has led to some shared attitudes. One of these shared attitudes is an embrace of what some call diversity. The idea that the culture and the people of the West are undeserving of their wealth and success, that other cultures, regardless of their success in other parts of the world, are exotic and even superior to the West. In fact, if they aren't successful, it's most likely that it's the West that has made them unsuccessful by exploiting them. And it's not just the culture of the West that's bad, it's the natives who inhabit it. The baby boomers who grew up in the wake of World War II, a war they were told during the Civil Rights Movement was a war against white supremacy, were hell-bent on raising a generation of children that didn't see color. This ad, which was produced in the 1970s and aired throughout the late 70s and 80s, is a reflection of that desire.
Yesterday, Jimmy said I was prejudiced.
Do you know what prejudice is?
No?
Well, prejudice is when you react to someone because of their religion or their color.
But I don't do that.
Who is Jimmy?
Jimmy's one of my Jewish friends.
Then you are prejudiced because you think of Jimmy as your Jewish friend and not your friend.
You see, even this little kid right here, he's racist, simply by noticing that his friend is Jewish. And it's up to his grandfather to eradicate this hate from his grandson using shame tactics so that he doesn't grow up to be the next Hitler. The guilt that the baby boomers felt for the prosperity of their generation was weaponized against their children to make up for the perceived wrongs of their ancestors. I still remember my mother, who was a baby boomer, telling me how proud she was of me when in first grade she came to pick me up from the bus stop after school. And I was talking about one of my friends, and she asked me which one of the kids I was referring to, and I told her it was the kid in the red jacket. When she looked and saw that the only kid in a red jacket was also the only black kid, she broke down crying. I hadn't described him as the black kid. I had said the kid in the red jacket. Their programming was working. At last, they could create the world that didn't see race. As we all know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. To achieve this utopia, nothing negative could ever be said about other races or cultures, and everything negative about the culture and the people of the West had to be pointed out and amplified at every opportunity. For example, when I went to public schools, and I went to public schools in different states, American history, from kindergarten all the way through high school, was taught as a timeline of terror. First, the Europeans came to America and genocided the Native Americans. Then they enslaved the Africans, all the while beating their wives while denying them the vote. Then, after putting the Japanese into camps during World War II, a war fought because bloodthirsty Europeans, of course, were genociding the Jews, the whites then made blacks sit in the back of the bus. Anyone who went to public school in America knows that this is the basic curriculum. A curriculum that was taught the children almost 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Children who then went home to empty houses because both parents were working, where they would watch cartoons containing these exact same messages or play violent video games, the bloodier the better, that provided an endless parade of Nazis to gun down. So it's no surprise that many of these children, once they were grown up, armed with the money that their boomer parents showered on them in an effort to buy the love that they had deprived them of in their formative years, that they left home to go off and experience this exotic world they had heard so much about that was so different, so in contrast to the evil patriarchy in the West. If nothing else, this would allow them to virtue signal on social media and dating apps to their less wealthy peers that they had broken the cycle. They weren't a part of this evil racist West. They were citizens of the world. They broke naan bread in India. They ate fried rice in China and bugs in Africa. They could finally escape the culture of oppression and patriarchy and embrace this superior exotic culture. A film with some fascinating insights into the minds of these Gen Xers and millennials, these world travelers eager to reject the West and to be different, but at the same time unable to escape the reality that, in a way, this drive to be different inevitably made them all the same, was the pre-9/11 film released in 2000, The Beach. The Beach stars a young Leonardo DiCaprio who plays a character named Richard, a white suburbanite American man traveling through Thailand, trying desperately to be different. The movie starts with the sights and sounds and the mayhem of Bangkok as he explains to the audience what has brought him there. He says, "My name is Richard. So what else do you need to know? Stuff about my family or where I'm from? None of that matters." Already, he's explaining how little he cares for his Western culture. Likely because he's going to extreme lengths to divorce himself from the legacy and from his boomer parents who he also feels no loyalty to. He tells the audience that he is in search of something beautiful and maybe something dangerous. He has fled the West with his Western money that has made his trip possible to find the paradise he was told his entire life existed just beyond the borders in the rest of the world. A man offers him a chance to drink snake blood, and he initially turns it down. It's not until the man compares him to the typical American tourist and says that they're all the same that he quickly changes his mind and agrees to drink the snake blood. Richard wants desperately to be different. He's embarrassed by being compared to other Westerners, and if it takes drinking snake blood to show how different he is, he'll do it. Ironically, the man likely knows this about Richard. He's probably just one of several tourists he's convinced to drink snake blood just by using that line, knowing that they'll do anything to show how different they are. So occupying the same seat that several American tourists before him likely occupied and drinking from the same glass, all of them feeling so compelled to reject the West and embrace anything foreign. They'll do anything to be different, which is exactly what makes them all the same. Just keep your mind open and suck in the experience, he says as he checks into a hotel that's playing American television to cater to all the other American guests. Richard begins to understand that by trying to be different, he is in fact conforming. The only downer is that everyone has the same idea. We all travel 1,000 miles to watch TV and check into somewhere with all the comforts of home, he says. After checking in, he has trouble getting into his room, and that's where he meets Frances. She is a French girl who is doing what all the other Western people are doing, touring exotic places with her French boyfriend so they can experience the exotic. After Richard gets into his room, he meets a Scottish man named Daffy. Daffy is a drug addict and a mentally unstable degenerate who goes on insane rants while sharing a joint with Richard. He tells Richard about a magical beach on an island that is hidden from tourists, completely secluded from all the tourists that Richard hates so much to be compared to. Richard doesn't think much of it, but the next day he finds a map to the beach nailed to his door. When he goes to talk to Daffy about it, he finds that Daffy's room is covered in blood and that Daffy is dead from an apparent suicide. After talking to local authorities, he decides he wants to go out and find this beach. If nothing else, it might give him a chance to score with the French girl he met earlier. He knocks on the French couple's door and says, "I just figure everyone tries to do something different, but we always end up doing the same damn thing." And that's all it takes to sell them on the idea of trying to find the magical beach. This drive to reject who they are and to be different and exotic is too overwhelming. They make plans and charter a boat that will take them close to a neighboring island. The island with the beach is on national land and travel there is prohibited. Along the way, Richard meets some American tourists who have heard of the beach, but they think it's a myth. Richard keeps his mouth shut initially, but the next morning he copies the map and leaves it under their door because, as he explains it, "I told myself that spreading news was just part of the nature of being a traveler, but if I was being completely honest, I was just like everyone else." Richard and the French couple are taken to the island that neighbors the island with the mythical beach. Richard hits on the French girl while her boyfriend sleeps, but aside from sharing a moment, nothing happens. And the next morning, the three of them decide to swim to their final destination. When they arrive exhausted and they cut through some of the jungle, they find a marijuana field, but before they can celebrate too much, they also discover that the field is being protected by armed guards. They escape the armed guards and make their way through the jungle, and after jumping off a waterfall, they meet a man who has come from the mystical beach. Of course, he's not a native of the beach, he's from the UK. He tells them that there's a whole community of Westerners who reside at the beach, and that they need to meet the leader, a woman named Sal. This part of the island is a utopian commune. No rules, no money, everyone contributing and doing their part. It has a very Burning Man vibe, a leftist paradise in the jungle. Richard meets Sal and tells her that Daffy drew them this map and that afterwards he committed suicide. The group is shocked. They explain that Daffy was one of the founders of the commune, but that he had become disillusioned and lost his mind before leaving. Sal asks if anyone else has a copy of the map, and Richard lies and says that they had the only copy. Sal explains that they want to keep the commune secret, and that it's very important that no one else comes, not just because the group doesn't want more outsiders, but because the marijuana farmers who share the island with them have been very clear about not allowing anyone else to come to the island. After burning the map, the commune relaxes around the newcomers, and finally, Richard and his two French companions are allowed to see the much talked about beach. They're overwhelmed by the beauty, and it's obviously the source of the euphoria shared by the commune. And that evening, the commune welcomes them as part of the tribe. Richard says, This became our world, and these people, our family. Back home was just one more place we didn't think about. And that is really part of what has drawn these people to this place. Upper middle class Westerners who had very little or no contact with their real families. Especially in this time before cell phones were widely available. Families who chose to work in offices while their children came home to empty houses to watch TV and play video games, whose view of the West was shaped by the propaganda and entertainment and education and parents who would rather focus on making money than raising their children. Money their children were now spending to get as far away from their parents as possible. Next, we see a montage of life in the island utopia. You can swim, play on the beach, sing songs around the fire. You can even play video games if that's what you want. The commune remained cut off from the outside world, and they only went to the mainland to sell marijuana or trade it for supplies every once in a while when they absolutely needed to. But Richard is still unsatisfied. He may live in this utopian paradise, but he still doesn't have the French girl that he desires. One of the members of the community complains to Sal that he wants to go to the mainland to see a dentist. She refuses and tells the group to just remove his tooth. As the man is heard screaming in the background, Sal looks to Richard and says, "Are you okay with this?" To which Richard replies, "Of course. We have a secret here. Sometimes people need to take a little pain to keep it that way." The scene is somewhat comical, but the dark undertone is obvious. What's truly important in this so-called utopia isn't the well-being of its members, but the secrecy, or by extension, the well-being of Sal, who is at the top of this hierarchy. It's simply human nature. Just like every community in the world, the people are free to enjoy life just so long as it doesn't conflict with the interests of the ruling class. Even in this far-off mythical beach, there is no avoiding this reality. Richard eventually hooks up with the French girl, and her boyfriend, Etienne, concedes defeat shortly afterwards. Everything seems to be working out great for Richard, and he impresses the whole group by killing a shark. Richard says, "For a while, we were untouchable in our happiness. But once again, this happiness comes into conflict with the ruling class." Sal tells the group that it's time to go to the mainland and get supplies. She picks Richard to come with her, and while they're at a bar, she finds out that he made a copy of the map. When the Americans he gave the copy to see him, Sal uses this to blackmail Richard into having sex with her and promises not to tell the group that he made a copy if he keeps it quiet. After they get back to the beach, everything seems to return to normal until another shark attacks. This time it kills one of the beachgoers and critically wounds another. The wounded survivor wants them to bring him medical help, but for them, secrecy is more important. Not only do they deny him access to medical care, but eventually his cries of pain become too much for the group to handle. He is ruining their paradise. He didn't have the decency to die like his friend. They couldn't just bury him in a box, pretend to be sad as they said nice things about him, and then get back to living the good life. They are reminded of the thing that they're all there to avoid: reality and pain. The solution the group comes up with, which is only protested by Etienne, is to exile the wounded man away from the group so they don't have to listen to him. They set up a tent just out of earshot out in the jungle and leave him to die. Etienne, who is disgusted by this, tries to take care of him, but the rest of the group quickly forgets they even exist, even Richard. Out of sight means out of mind. Paradise is resumed. But Richard begins to have nightmares. He sees Daffy dead in his room, who rises from the grave to cryptically say, "Pay them in dollars and fuck their daughters and turn it into Wonderland, Richard." He awakes from this nightmare to find Sal, who brings Richard to a lookout point to show him that the people from the bar have now arrived on the island. She says that he has to stay there every single day until he gets the map from them and turns them away. She then goes back to the commune and tells his girlfriend that they had sex to alienate him from any connection he might have to the group. Richard has become exiled. He committed the sin of inviting the West into their paradise, and now he must prevent these tourists from intruding on their utopia. A perfect example of the left believing in border security if it means protecting what they value: hedonism. He watches the newcomers every day and slowly begins to lose touch with reality. He imagines that he's playing a video game and stalks the marijuana farmers. Richard has been escaping reality for so long at the beach, he's unable to face the jungle without imagining a new reality. He imagines that Daffy is with him and gunning down the Western tourists that threaten his paradise. Eventually, the newcomers find their way to the marijuana fields. They panic when confronted by the farmers, and the farmers overreact and shoot them. This seems to snap Richard out of his insanity, and he runs back to the beach to warn his French friends. Etienne says he can't leave the injured man that the group had sent out into the jungle. He now has gangrene and is dying. Richard tells the couple to leave and then suffocates the man. This film frames this as a mercy killing, but really, it's more like a cheapening of life that reflects this man's new position in a new hierarchy in which Richard was the head. This man was in the way of their interests, and so he had to be sacrificed so they could escape by running back to the West that they rejected for this exotic life. Before they can escape, they're rounded up by the farmer, who demands to know why the people they killed had a map. He says that the deal was that no more people could come. He tells them that now the deal is broken and they have to leave. Sal says they aren't going to leave and blames the map's existence on Richard. The farmer then gives her a choice. They can stay, but only if she executes Richard. Sal agrees. After all, at the end of the day, it's the interests of the ruling class that matter. She goes to shoot Richard, only to discover that the farmer had given her an unloaded gun. And that's when paradise is shattered. Reality finally sets in. The group can't send this off into the jungle to die peacefully. The group is now faced with what Sal was willing to do to keep the beach a secret, and they no longer feel safe in their utopia. They all flee the island. One by one, the group travels back to the West. Richard gets a tech job and becomes one of the faceless in the legions of people from his generation working behind a computer terminal. But what did he learn from this experience? Did he learn the value of life? That this yearning for the exotic wasn't all it was cracked up to be? That the West had tradition and culture and order that was worth preserving? No. At the end of the film, all we are left with is the feeling that all he really learned was that life is dangerous out in the real world. And maybe it really isn't all that bad being a cog in the machine. Viewing the world through a computer screen is safer. And it's good that he was able to go out in the world and find himself. It didn't matter that he had ruined the French couple's relationship. It didn't matter that 7 people were now dead. 5, a direct result of his actions. 1, he had murdered personally. It didn't matter because he got what he had come for. He got the perfect picture. For BlackPilled, I'm Devin Stack. If you like my videos, make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you share. If you want to support my work, you can grab a copy of my book, Day of the Rope, send crypto to one of the addresses below, or become a patron at patreon.com/BlackPilled.